for it to say, there we go, now we're live. All right, thank you for joining our on-air industry panel. Unfortunately, I couldn't get anybody here for on site, but hey, it is what it is. So we got two folks here from the industry. I'll let them do their own introductions, and then we'll kind of go from there. So I'll start with Geoffrey first.
All right, yeah, there's some echo.
Here, let me turn off my mic so it doesn't do that.
Okay. All right, I'm Geoffrey Corey. I originally worked at the open source lab a couple of years ago. It's closer to 5 now, I think. In that time, I have worked at the Apache Software Foundation on the infrastructure team, and now I work at Apple for the Siri production engineering team. And also, I have to preface this, nothing I say here represents my employer.
Yes, of course, of course. Matthew, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My association with the open source lab is from quite a while ago doing Google Summer of Code. And since then, I've worked a number of places, did a stint at Wolfram Research, and I am currently at SAP Labs, and I work in their big data group as a platform architect, and DevOps evangelist is my latest addition to my title. So
that's really good. So why don't I start off with a couple of questions, and either one of you can kind of answer as you see fit. But what got you really interested in getting into this, or how did you get involved in doing DevOps originally, and what got you interested?
Originally, it was I had a curiosity of trying out Linux back in middle school, of all things. I was just mucking around with computers and wanted to learn more about them. And originally, it didn't work. I couldn't get anything to boot, and I kept trying to dig into why, trying a bunch of different distributions, and then was dealing with Fedora and having to install my own drivers. So I just kept digging and reading and looking at error codes, pasting those into Google, and trying to figure out what I was doing and why I was doing it. And just that curiosity has been my driver ever since, which is I want to do something, look for a guide, follow that guide to make sure it works, then break it and make it do what I want to do.
Geoffrey, how about you? Or I should say Matthew, sorry.
It's okay. So for a long time, I kind of flirted that line between systems administration and like doing software engineering. I kept bouncing back and forth in different roles. And I guess in 2008 timeframe, I think they were starting to get a lot of buzz around this concept of DevOps, and I was working as a release engineer, and I had a manager that was like, we've got to clean this up. I want you to take everything and just try and automate yourself out of a job. And that's kind of been my job description for the last 10 or 11 years.
Geoffrey, what kind of advice do you think you can give these students on how to get involved and how you can kind of get yourself ready to be employed by somebody who wants to hire folks like you?
Biggest advice is always be curious. Like, never settle for just fixing the problem or the symptom of the problem. That's always the easiest thing to do, is fix a symptom, but it's harder to dig down to fix what actually caused the problem, make it not happen again. And never just take what's on the surface as the answer. Usually problems that in industry you run into are actually very nuanced, and you have to put together a lot of detail with basically no information given to you. So it's running into situations like you are now in various small bits and pieces that will help you build into being able to solve bigger problems down the line.
Matthew, how about you?
Yeah, I should second what Geoffrey said a little bit, is being able to dig in. Being able to self-learn is a really great skill. Working for a very large software company now, I have the pleasure of working with a lot of different skill sets, and it's, this environment is very different in that regard. But working for startups and stuff, it was the ones that were successful were the self-learners. What else? Yeah, don't be too married to a particular technology. Really look at trying to understand the problem and determine what works. It's like, Kubernetes and Docker is a big thing now, but that doesn't mean that that's the best solution to every problem. Sometimes there's a simpler solution.
Yeah, that's totally right. Matthew, do you want to describe what a typical day is for you, I should say, in quotation marks?
In my current role, it's a lot of mentoring and meetings. Prior to that transition, it was, usually we'd start off the day, we'd have a 15-minute stand-up. We'd review both production incidents from the last 24 hours and discuss any hot issues from that, as well as the development tasks we had on the board. Then I would do a mix of working on some development and bug fixes, and as a senior engineer, a lot of helping other people with their stuff. Periodically was on call, and the week you're on call, you don't get much development work done. But
what about in the prior jobs you had where you were a little bit more hands-on? What was your typical day like?
Let's see. When I was doing the work at Wolfram, yeah, it was pretty much just heads down. I would look through, once I had the system that I wrote up and running, it was kind of look through the logs and look for anomalies, and then work on bug fixes and features. Because the beauty of automation was that once I did this simple thing, suddenly like feature do more, or kept pretty busy doing that. Learned the hard way to have to design for testing, because the original version was not.
How about you, Geoffrey? I know you work on the Siri production engineering team. What's your typical day like?
Usually in the morning, it's checking graphs because we have way too many data analytics. So there's an overview dashboard, and I look for things that look different, lines that stand out. Not a good way to explain that really without kind of an example graphic. And then trying to dig into what, from experience in those graphs, is an actual problem, which ones aren't, and finding out what's causing the problem. That's usually the morning, and it turns out it's bad hardware somewhere. And then depending on the week or the day, it's either deploying new versions of Siri, spinning up that, dealing with some of our Canary system that will be going to production soon, or interacting with the hardware team that runs the data centers to either fix Puppet problems or work on updating some Puppet code from our side for some of the data analytics we do get from our systems. Also dealing with outages when they happen, because it's human created things. They're always going to have outages, and too many teams working on too many things. So there is some overlap where you'll have outages from that. And then if there is missing data and it's within my team's control, develop ways to start getting that data so that we can use it in the future, so that we don't have an outage from it again.
Cool, very cool. One thing I'll let you everybody know here, Puppet's a configuration management system, one of many that we use in DevOps, and basically it's a way of coding what you do with your how you manage a system and so forth. And so that's what Geoffrey was talking about. I think I'll go ahead and open up questions here to students that are here, and I'll try and repeat them if you guys can't hear them. So does anybody have any questions? Not everybody all at once. Oh, yeah.
What are the most common languages that you, if you do any coding for your jobs or for your personal time, what are the languages you find that you are using the most for, or well, maybe what are the languages that you are scripting or programming in that you find the most fun to, or you find yourself scripting in your fun time?
Did you guys hear that?
Yeah. One of the ones I use the most is Python, just because it's so darn easy to get simple things done and intermediate things done in an easy way. I also use a lot of Bash to just iterate through certain data on a larger scale than doing it by hand. If it becomes more common that I'm doing that same task again, then I'll start looking at probably writing it in Python or some sort of automation script that our CI system runs. But for the most part, it's just been Python and Bash.
I've used a few more different languages than that. It's varied based on where I've been at. Do a lot of Ruby in the current and previous job because we based our configuration management around Chef. And so that was a natural extension for that. Although from my experience, I think Python is probably a much better language for this work. It's a little more batteries included, as they like to say. What else? Personally, I do most of my work now in TAM. It's Technical Architecture Modeling Language, which is a variation of UML, but that's not the answer you're probably looking for. My philosophy is usually to use the language that's best suited, and that could be either because of the problem space or because of the culture of where I'm at. So if I'm it'll be Python. And my general rule has always been the moment you need a data structure or need something reusable, you should move to another language.
Cool, cool. I know there was a question up in the back. What they were using what? Canary for? Okay. Is that to somebody specific or just either of them? Oh, so you mean, oh, okay. So Geoffrey, what do you use Canary for?
It's if you've heard of Chrome's Canary, it's kind of analogous to that, and it's getting production traffic on code that's about to be released, at least from the server side of Siri, because everyone knows the only way to really find your issues is to have real production code on it. There's only so much your testing can catch because you're writing it as a technically focused person, whereas if it's a tool for normal people to use, they're going to use it in ways you never thought that they would use it or expect to use it. And so they're going to find problem sets that your testing is never going to find. And so we use that to help us get the server-side releases at a better quality when we do release it to all of production.
Any other questions from folks? Not, I'll think of another one. Or how about you guys? Do you have any questions for the students here, or advice you would like to pass along?
Probably my best advice is to just always be curious. Like if you hear someone talking about some sort of new software out there, start reading about it. And if you don't understand what they're really talking about, start pulling the bits and pieces as you're reading it apart and looking into those. That's the other way is to just jump in the deep end, go through how-to tutorials if you don't like Kubernetes, go look for some documentation about how to set it up. It may not make a lot of sense at first, and you'll get exposed to way too many things all at once. But as you start building your skill set in debugging these and looking at going through these situations, it will help you immensely in industry, because you're going to be doing the same thing. You're going to be following some how-to guides, some simple documentation, and having a bunch of tools thrown at you all at once that you may or may not have experience with. And as you start building that up, you'll start learning multiple tools that can be applied to not only your one project you're working on, but as a general skill set that's needed for any sort of debugging purpose.
Do you have anything to add to that, Matthew?
Sure. And I had a thought and it just kind of flitted away. Right. So one thing I wasn't good at early on that I think is super important is networking, and not the cables and pushing the bits part. You know, talking to people and making contacts outside your immediate circle. And I think this is a lot easier than when I was starting. I have some friends that work on organizing some various DevOps days conferences, and those are fantastic for meeting other people and sharing ideas. And yeah, it's, you know, it's a very technical field, but so much of what we get is still from that face-to-face interface, and that's, I think, really important. The one other thought there. Oh yes, documentation. Learn how to write good documentation. You'll thank yourself, and everyone that works after you will thank you too. It's hard to do, but you have to make an effort at it.
Cool. Do you have a question? Or are you just stretching your arm? Okay. Anybody have a question? All right. Well, I have one. What do you think these students can do now while they're still at OSU that can really help them kind of get going? I know we talked about that a little bit. Or if you can kind of describe your experience of what you did while you were here, or wished you could have done while you're here to kind of help prepare you for getting into this. How about Jeff? You can go first.
Get involved with the Linux users group on campus. There's a lot of good connections there that still chime in and help try to organize stuff. But there's going to be a lot of people there who, at various points in the degree programs, that you can start gathering skill sets and insights from. There's a lot of people there who know a lot of deep details about Linux that you may or may not have experience with or an opportunity to get exposed to yet, but would be very beneficial down the road when you start getting closer to industry. The other thing is, don't just when you're in your computer science courses, don't just do what they tell you to do when it comes to setting up your environment. One of the things I did in my data structures course was they said use Microsoft, and I can't remember what the name of the IDE they use is, but I decided not to use that. I wanted to use Linux, and I set it up with Makefiles and Eclipse IDE of all things, just because I wanted to try it that way and learn more about creating the environment myself. And that sort of like do what you want to do, but get your work done will be immensely beneficial, because you learn how to problem solve and debug in any sort of environment instead of just one specific tailored environment. And it allows your skills to become portable to different places regardless of what platform you're on.
Matthew, how about you?
I'm not sure I have much to add to that fantastic answer.
All right, then. Oh, we have one in the back.
So
Other than stuff like configuration management, Kubernetes, and Docker, what are some things that you use day to day that really help your process of automating your job?
Did you guys hear that? How about Matthew, you go first.
I've used a number of things, and my primary platform is Mac, so I had a lot of annoying things that just, every time you did them took a few seconds or a minute, and I wrote Apple scripts for that. I wrote bash wrapper scripts around some obtuse interfaces we had to use because, I didn't like it. It varies. I mean, tools for automating, that's understanding the process is important for that, and then it's just use whatever is convenient. The key thing is to iterate. You're not going to get it right or have it be awesome on the first pass, but it's like, what can you deliver today? And then what can you deliver next week?
Geoffrey, what do you have to say?
I actually haven't written too many. It's funny, I haven't written too much automation to automate myself out. It's more so been Puppet has been either the right set or writing alert queries for our metrics that we store so that we can catch issues before they become large problems that do cause an outage. Some of those are reactionary because we have run into an outage with that where it would have been easier to catch it earlier, where we could fix it and had less customer impact. But more so, it's just learning that the software platforms we do have and taking advantage of some of the automation tooling someone has already written and either extend it or look into something new to help with that. But most of the automation I've written has either been Puppet or alert queries for our metric system so that humans can actually find it.
All right. Where do you see DevOps really going in the future? It's been around for about 10 years now, and where do you kind of see that industry and what we do going in the next 5 to 10 years? How about you, Geoffrey?
That is a good question. It's becoming more and more important, especially because as you have larger platforms that a lot of customers use and or pay money for, you have metrics that are much more nuanced and subtle that you need to be aware of. And so it's been a friction point even for a lot of years, which is sysadmins having to know more about the platform that they're running code wise, having much more connections with the developers themselves. It's also getting the developers a bit more operationally focused as well, and realizing the impacts of some of the development choices they do use, and bringing that in line earlier in their development process so that they don't overload any point of production when it does release at scale. So it's learning a bit more about the platform itself and coming to a common understanding between operations and developers. Because you're always going to have some DevOps people who are more dev inclined, focused, and competent. You'll have more people who are more operationally focused, and you'll never have someone who can fit both sides 100%. That doesn't work well. And so it's building up that relationship between the two quite well, so that you have people on the development side you can rely on when things do pop up.
Matthew, how about you?
Yeah, it's been around 10 years in name, but there's still a lot of work to do culturally. A lot of places, are grabbing on that, hey, we need to do DevOps, we should do DevOps, but they don't really know what it means. It's like the early days of Agile. It's like, here, Agile can make you work better. It's like, we should get some of that. And it's, it's a new name, but a lot of the same processes. And so there's still a lot of work to do there on organizations understanding what it really means to operate a service with a DevOps mindset. And that's going to be ongoing. I mean, I still run into places that still don't quite get agile. So that's just going to be a constant thing. The other big thing is that they're talking about is shift left. You know, I mean, we've heard about SecOps, but really the extension of the DevOps philosophy is that should be shifting left and into the DevOps pipeline and not be a separate discipline. And so I think we're going to really start to see that kick up and be integrated, and we're going to start to see more of these things to be integrated earlier on in the development and the release process.
Anybody have any questions? I'm doing all of them, so. I guess I do have one question. You know, one thing that I've had problems with over the years is keeping up with all the new technology and all the new tools and things that you can use and picking the right tool for the right job. And, you know, kind of like right now, I'm trying to find ways of incorporating things like Kubernetes, because that seems to be the next greatest thing that people want to use and deploy things with. Whether it's right or not, I don't know. How do you kind of keep up with that, and how you decide whether to dive into that tool, use that tool, or kind of keep up with all of that? How about you, Matt, first?
In the past, I would follow a lot of blogs of key people and see kind of where things were going, and would experiment with things on my own, independent of a work project. And then when needs arose, it would, I was like, oh, hey, you know, there's this great tool, or we could try leveraging some of this stuff. I am not able to do that anymore. I've had to learn in the past couple of years to rely a lot more on other people I work with. So like, I'll find things or hear things because I'm a little bit more plugged in and network than I used to be now. And it's like, okay, you know, we've got this thing coming. These things. And it's like, I have to trust the people I work with that, hey, can you look into this thing and tell me what you think? So two sides there.
Yeah, that's really hard to do. How about you, Jeff?
I mean, you kind of approach it with more so the needs of what your work is day to day, and if you work in it a lot, you know the pain points of the tools that you do use at work, and you do see things and hear rumblings in various news articles, tech blogs, things like Hacker News, Reddit, whatnot. Just kind of try it out, see what after you get beyond just a simple how-to of, hey, I have a service that's up and working. It's okay, let's try something a little bit more advanced. I want to do some weirdness with it and see how difficult it was to do that. And then once you start figuring out some of the more nuances of that software, then you can start evaluating whether or not it will fix some of the pain points of your current work, and whether or not it's worth the effort to invest in bringing that to fruition at your work itself, and whether someone will dive into it. But getting going requires the initial self-starting portion of it, and wanting to find out more about it, the curiosity portion, and just always trying things just for the heck of it, because it sounds fun to do at some point. And ultimately, you're the person who makes the judgment call of, no, this won't work for us, or it was fun, but it really doesn't fit what I'm looking for, or not.
Well,
yeah, and I just had two thoughts to add to that. One is you know, watch out for the not invented here. You know, chances are somebody's had a similar problem, and if you think you're unique, you're probably either not looking hard enough or not thinking about the problem correctly. There's very few problem spaces that we deal with today that there's not some pre-existing work. And the other thing, the nature of what Geoffrey was talking about there, that was the beauty of the Google 20% time, was that, you know, the engineers had flexibility to do that. I wish more places allowed things like that.
Yes, I agree. I try and do that as much as we can at the open source lab, but we always have so many great things we got to do. Any questions from the audience here? Otherwise, I think I might wrap this up. Thank you both for coming here, and at least virtually, I should say, and joining us. We're going to be doing some bi-weekly kind of open office meetups at our office, so that'll be fun, hands-on stuff they'll get to work on in the coming weeks. So you guys have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk with you later.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
See ya. Bye.